Welcome to the Montreal International Film Festival's talk show, Insider Approach. I'm Jeffrey McNeil. Today, we are honored to have actor Greg Bryk on our program. Originally from Winnipeg, Greg went to Queen's University to play football, and after winning the Vanier Cup, he realized that acting was his true calling. Greg then chose the bold move to study the art in New York City. Since that time, between television, film, and most recently video games, Greg can boast more than 110 acting credits where he has created interesting and compelling characters. So, he went to Queen's, planned to be a lawyer, played football, won the Vanier Cup. But before we get into that, I'd love to know what it was like growing up in the Bryk household. I believe your father was a lawyer. Were either of your parents interested in the arts?
Well, no, not really. My dad was a lawyer and then a judge. And my mom was a school teacher. And then she stopped when she had me, and she was a stay-at-home mom for, I think until my little brother was maybe 13 or 14, and then she went back and worked in the school. My dad had been involved in Ukrainian dancing, like pretty heavily when he was young, and we did some choreography and stuff like that. But and there was an actor, a woman that was on Hill Street Blues, and she's actually a wonderful Canadian actor named Mimi Kuzik. And that was the only actor that we ever knew. And I saw her in a play in Winnipeg once called Just a Commedia. It was the only play I saw until I was in university, well into university. I grew up a typical Canadian sports kid, played a lot of ball hockey, played a lot of hockey, played baseball, played football, went to school, loved movies. When I was in high school, I worked in a movie theater. And I think the opening sequence for Rain Man will be forever burned into my mind. I used to change clothes a lot when I was a little kid, used to just always be in my imagination. And my mom once asked me when I was like 6 or 7 after the 8th or 9th change that she had to pick up from during the day. And she said, why do you change clothes all the time? Why are you always getting dressed up? And I said, it's no fun just being me. So I guess there must have always been the wanderlust to explore, to escape, or to find, which is sort of every actor's journey, is finding themselves in other characters and revealing those hidden bits of themselves. And then sometimes being able to be most brave and most honest when you're given permission through a character.
And you never did any community theater or anything like that growing up?
No, nothing. I auditioned for a play when I was in high school, didn't get cast because the guy said, you're a football player. Like, what are you doing? And then not until when I was in university, and in my 3rd year of university, the year that we won the Vanier Cup, I had an elective, just a free slot in my schedule on the way to law school, and I took a playwriting class. And the professor was a very well-known mask maker in Canada named Fred Uringer. He liked the way I wrote. He liked the way I read what I wrote, and he challenged/encouraged me to audition for a play in my 4th year. So I told my football coaches, thank you very much. I had an amazing time, great friendships, won national championship. And then I auditioned for Hamlet the following year, and it was an interesting idea he had. He was a mask maker, very, very well-known mask maker across Canada for the Stratford Festival, and had this idea that all the different actors would play Hamlet at various parts of the play, and we'd exchange masks in the mutable self, and all of those sort of interesting concepts that he was laying on the play. And then after about 3 weeks of chemistry reads and mixing and matching this company and who would play what when, he pulled me aside and said, I've had this idea in my mind since I was a young man like you in my early 20s. He was 21 too when he had the concept in theater school. He goes, and I'm going to probably never direct another Hamlet. He was in his 70s at the time. But I would like to scrap the idea I had for the play, and I want you to play Hamlet. And that very same night, I kissed my now wife of 28 years for the first time. And I was falling madly in love with her and with acting, and my life just took a 180-degree turn, and the play went well, and I was enthralled with the whole art of it, although I didn't really know much about the art, and I knew that New York was a place to train. So we packed a little suitcase. We moved to New York and started this grand adventure full of, a lot of highs and some really brutal lows and babies along the way, and a lot of good work and some very bad work and a lot of no work. But it's been my life, and I don't think I would trade it.
What is it about acting that you love? To give up football, and we both have the sports background, how do you move from, I'm going to play football, win the Benny Cup, to, you know what, I'm going to do Hamlet? What was it about this professor that he saw something in you? You mentioned he loved the way you wrote, he loved the way you read. But in your end, what did you see inside of your brain, inside of your soul, that motivated you to want to be an actor?
Well, at first, I think I didn't really have a firm idea. I'd always, it's intriguing, the mystery of acting and movie stars and all of those things. There's an obvious surface appeal to it. I really liked writing. I approached it. I'd always written poetry, and then I really enjoyed the work that we did in this playwriting class. I liked reading my own stuff. There was a sense of, revealing different parts of yourself, but also connecting with another person, even a person reading opposite you. And it was a thrilling challenge. And I suppose there was a degree of early vanity. I liked the idea of being in a play. I liked the idea of, and it was all ideas at that point because I didn't know what any of it meant. But then once I started rehearsing this play, once I started rehearsing Hamlet, you'd find moments with another actor, and it all comes, 28 years, 30 years since Hamlet later, and lots of work, and it all comes to me back to just that moment with another person. It's just that everything else goes quiet, and you step up to your mark and they step to theirs, and you connect with each other and you share something meaningful with each other. And if you do it honestly and humbly and bravely, because to share the most guarded secrets that you have, or your fears, your vulnerabilities, your hopes, your dreams, all of those things that you put into a character, and if you can share that with your partner, and then the camera catches that, or the audience catches that, or the VOM for a video game catches that, I think you've done something meaningful. Because we're we're communal animals, and we like to share stories, and we like to share moments. And a lot of people don't have the opportunity to do that, but they share what the work you're doing in a darkened theater, or in the living room, or up on the other side of the proscenium arch in a theater. So I think the intimacy draws me in. I love it. All the other stuff is, and I got to be honest, Jeff. Again, over 110 movies and TV shows, and I still get butterflies that walk from the trailer to set. I don't care how big the movie is. I don't care how small the movie is. The thrill of that hunt, the thrill of that moment is still exciting for me.
Yeah, it's almost like you create the intimacy of it, but there's also an opportunity to inspire other people as well. If you're really into it and they're really into your performance, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that a lot of people don't have the emotional vocabulary to maybe even to express what they're feeling inside. But if you're watching a great performance and it resonates with you, and it's like you have the catharsis through the character, or sometimes just entertaining people is a gift in itself. Life can be so relentlessly heavy and depressing and stressful. So if you can laugh for half an hour or an hour or an hour and a half, or you can be transported away from the drudgery of whatever you're struggling with and just be transported to another world, I think there's a great value in that. And I think that's as old as being human. I think it echoes all the way back to the campfire and sharing stories and jokes and just entertaining each other.
Now, you've been on set more than a few times. Are there any particular actors that you've had an especially tight connection with?
Yeah, look, there's two things. One, I think that when I was on a show called Bitten for a number of years, and there was an incredible sense of family with that cast. I was a little bit older, and played the Pack Alpha, and there was a wonderful group of young actors, Laura Vandervoort and Grayson and Michael Lund and Michael Xavier and Stephen Lund and Michael Xavier, and I loved these guys. And we, my wife and I, we'd have them over for pack dinners at the house, and they became really like a family. So that was an amazing, all-encompassing experience. As an actor, I love the camaraderie on set. I love to get to know people in that environment. I'm not a big go out and socialize guy, or I haven't been, because I had kids at home always and a life at home, and then I really tried to keep the work, and life, the life. So even on, I'd always, people with my colleagues would laugh if we were on location somewhere, because no matter where, I would see the inside of my hotel room, and that would be about it. Or I'd go out for dinner by myself, and everyone, there was, I guess, an air of mystery about that. But mostly it was because I like to prepare for the next day. But I also know that you really do have to work at your craft, but you also have to work at keeping a life stable, and you can, it's very easy to confuse things, and you're in a very emotionally fertile state or turbulent state, and it's best to, for me, it's like a circus lion that puts himself back in the cage every night and locks the door and waits for the next day to come.
Learning how to keep a stable home life is definitely one of David Rottenberg's teachings, actually. He unfortunately passed away recently. How has he influenced your career?
Well, it's interesting. After I went to theater school in New York at Circle in the Square, I hadn't trained with anybody. Well, at the conservatory in Stratford, I hadn't really trained with anybody. But I went to see, I was struggling when I first got back to Toronto. I didn't, it was kind of a nebulous, and I found David, but through a reputation, and I went and I took his master class, and I found him to be very practical. His work was very actionable. It wasn't up here. It was just like a series of checkpoints that you could, if you just grounded yourself in those. And he challenged you as a teacher. He wasn't a warm, and he was a fair person, but he wasn't going to blow sunshine. He was honest, and I liked that. And I just found that after his working with him for a while, the work really started to flow. And I will give him credit, and maybe it was timing in life, maybe it was the roles, but I also think that his work allowed me to just approach particularly auditions in a very workable way, as opposed to just being overwhelmed by too many things. Sometimes as actors, we have too many, it's like a golfer, you're thinking too many things. You need to really simplify to the essence of what you're trying to do, to connect to the other person, what you're trying to get from that other person, to be in a present, emotionally available space, and then and free to play. Just, you don't know. You don't have to control. You don't have to shape. You don't have to plan. You have to prepare, but never plan, and be open to what happens in the moment, what comes up, the happy accidents, just the magic of uncertainty with every take.
The magic of uncertainty. I love that, actually. And David's book called Act is something I listen to fairly regularly, actually. So.
Yeah, he's great. Yeah, I was shocked. I was saddened when he passed. I hadn't realized that he had been fighting cancer for as long as he had. And, I talked to him not that long ago. I touched base with him, and was thinking about coming back to his class, and he didn't mention anything. And then the next I'd heard he had passed. So.
Yeah, so condolences for certain. Do you have any mentors?
I don't have any mentors, and I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Probably a bad thing. I have colleagues who I respect. I have people whose work that I admire from afar, but also a group of actors that I came up with, people who I really like working with, and challenging each other. That one of my great sort of longings of loss is this, post-COVID, when everything had to be virtual, and then the business, I guess, for expedience or cost or whatever, stayed virtual. And the sense of community, of being in a room with other good actors, and the nerves, and just but saying hello and seeing faces. And when I was coming up, you would do that, a couple times a week. You'd see the same faces, and you'd see people get in and out of relationships and marriages and become parents, and you lived with them, and you competed against them, but also celebrated their successes. And there was a real sense of camaraderie, and there was a sense of community and a sense of a business, that we were in it together. And I find that now where you're just sort of sending things off into the ether, a little digital file, and it's lost some of the immediacy and some of the excitement and some of the humanity of it all. And I also think, to be honest, I think that the work suffers as well, because there's something to be said, and you'd know this, when you're on set and you're losing the light and it's a very complicated emotional scene and they need you to get it. They need you to be able to do it like now, with pressure and all of those things, to be able to focus yourself and be present. And if you've auditioned for something and you've done 300 takes and sent the best in, when you had all day, 2 days, 3 days to keep going, it's different than being in front of people. And when you walked into the audition room, particularly the callbacks and all the producers are there and the director's there and whatever, you've got to harness your energy and deliver what needs to be delivered in that moment. And I think that, I've heard that a lot of directors are finding they'll get an actor on set and what they thought they were getting isn't what they're getting, because they didn't have to deliver in a moment.
Oh, definitely. It's when I was younger, I'd be putting 50, 60 attempts at a self-tape, and getting back to David Roddenberry, he always said that the first take or your third take were the one you should go with. Just keep it simple, be in the moment. And as you mentioned earlier, those happy accidents are very castable.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Now, in terms of mentoring others, your son is now gaining success as an actor. Could you speak how you're mentoring him?
Sure. So actually, all three of my kids are in the business. Both boys are very, so Dempsey, my oldest, who I've had the great privilege of working with a few times now, including we starred opposite each other in a movie called The Fight Machine. He was also in a movie I did called Marlene, where he played we both played Stephen Truscott at different points of his life. He was in Mary Kills People when I was, for his first job. And he, he worked on Heartland for a number of years, and then he got cast in Willow, the huge Disney show, a few years ago. When he first started, he had a full scholarship at Western University for the Richard Ivey Business School. And he said, I want to leave school and I want to be an actor. I want to go to New York. And I said, absolutely not. Because as much as I love this business, I know it's hard and it's uncertain and there's long dry periods and it's very difficult to build a life around it. And I wanted him to do something stable and normal, and he was not having it. And he looked me in the eyes and he said, I know it's going to be a tough business, and you can either be someone who helps me or an obstacle I have to overcome. And you're my dad, so you choose. And so I got to work with him. And Billy, my middle one, was in Ghostbusters and then starred opposite Julianne Moore and Finn Wolfhard in Jesse Eisenberg's directorial debut called When You Finish Saving the World. And then he starred, co-wrote, and co-directed a movie that was a big hit at TIFF this year called Hell of a Summer. So he's well on his way. He's in New York. Dempsey's between New York and LA. And then my daughter, Ella, is at a Meisner school called the Maggie Flanagan Studio in New York, living in Soho. And she's just starting, and she did her first movie last year. So all three kids, I'm their dad first, and I try to be whatever they need me to be, and that could be giving advice, listening, helping them prepare for auditions, being their running lines, being their scene partner, being their off camera reader. And in fact, I have, when they were at home, there was a lot to do. And now that they're away, and I've done this for their friends and some family, and I'm starting a business, which is sort of a coaching business, but it's going to be called The Actor's Dad. And it's going to be content on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. And then I'll also do private coaching. But it's literally as if you had a dad who'd been in the industry for 30 years. Whatever you need me to be for you, that's what I'll do. In the same way that I do that for the kids. You need advice. You want to talk through agents. You want to, your first day on set, or you're having trouble with the scene. You're having trouble with coworkers. You want to prep for an audition. You want to prep for a role. Like whatever I do for my kids, as their dad, who has been an actor for 30 years. That's what I'm going to do for people. So this is something very kind of exciting. I have the bandwidth now. I have the time. As they've moved out, they only need me so much. And I think that it's something that I can give a value, both as an ability. I mean, I've had the pleasure of working with you, of coaching you. So to be a coach for people, but also to be a mentor, to be a guide, to sometimes pat you in the back, and to be honest, sometimes kick you in the ass, because this can be a very complicated business full of great highs and great lows. And to be able to talk to someone with the perspective of a life in it is, I think, useful. So that's, again, it's going to be, I've got the domain names. It's going to be The Actor's Dad, and it's going to be on Instagram, and I'll create content like Advice from Your Dad, weekly advice, answering questions that people pose, and then also do some private coaching with that as well.
That's amazing. And speaking firsthand, I found you professional, effective. You're definitely candid as well, which is great. And as you mentioned, it sometimes means that kick in the butt. You do.
I think that everybody can learn to be a better actor, right? But it doesn't help someone if you coddle, I'm not going to say work that isn't good, but not their best, because you're going out to compete against the world. There are hundreds of people auditioning for every part, every step of the way up. And if you have, all you can do is your best, but you have to do your best. And there are, sometimes you feel like, oh, I've done all the work I need to do, or I've dug as deep as I need to dig, or I've been as personal as I can be, and you're not. And sometimes it's important to be said, you can do more. And again, I saw such growth in your work over the little bit of time we worked together, and I know you've gone on and booked more work since, and I think it's important. I think it's important to be encouraged, but I think it's also important to be pushed.
Absolutely. The carrot, the stick, all of it. And just having somebody look at you, and you might think that you're doing your absolute best, but somebody looking in from the outside could say, you know what, this person could do a lot better with just a little nudge, a little redirection.
Maybe look at it a different way. Maybe be given this suggestion. Maybe try it this way. Just, it's what a good director would do on a film set for you, or, a good teacher in a classroom. So I like to do all those things, but also the psychology of, being around my kids and all their friends who are also coming up, and some have reached great heights in the business, but they also want to know how you build a life. They're curious about the life of an actor, not just the craft of an actor. And again, I look to provide that service and give that value to people moving forward with these through these platforms, and through the Actor's Dad coaching, and working on a book. So it'll be a whole sort of circle of things that I'm going to try to bring out to market.
Beautiful. And on that note, it's this business can be emotionally draining, sometimes physically draining, mentally challenging, absolutely. How do you stay fit in all of those aspects?
Well, I mean, to be honest, sometimes I wish that I was more fit than I am. It's very easy to try to numb yourself, particularly if you're not careful about creating divisions in your work. I'll like a couple of little things that I work out. Every morning I'll wake up, I start with a Wim Hof breathing, then I do a cold shower, then I'll do shadow boxing for 3 rounds just to warm myself up after the shower, do some sit-ups, kettlebells, and a quick yoga, and then I start my day. And then later on in the day, I try to get to the gym and lift weights 3 times a week, and do cardio twice a week. Now, I also, grew up using food in particular. I haven't, drugs have never been a big issue, but food and booze for sure, to make yourself feel better, to change your state when you're, so much of this business is waiting, and you get really excited. Am I going to get this part or not get this part? And you want to calm yourself down. And I find that the more you can not rely on crutches like that and just sit in that tension, the better off you are. I think it's really important. Yeah, it's hard. But I'm also, with the work, like, I won't go to set in my street clothes, my from home clothes. I don't care if transport has picked me up and they're running late. Oh my God, we're late, we're late. We're going to take the time for me to get out of my clothes, fold them up and put them away, get into the wardrobe before I go to set, because what I do not want is the bleed over. I'm going to access parts of myself that I'm going to need for the work that are not the parts of myself that I want to bring home with me. So I want to go through the ritual of, like in the olden days, well, not the olden days, even in the theater now, you're in your dressing room and you're putting on the makeup in front of the mirror and all that stuff by yourself. And then when it's over, you have that moment of, the hot towel to take it all away and to leave that behind. I think that's very important because so many actors work in such a dangerous and vulnerable way. So like the Philip Seymour Hoffmans and the Phoenixes and all of those great artists that unfortunately couldn't keep the work, and then not need to dull themselves or protect themselves with drugs or food or whatever outside of work. So I really make a study of that, and sometimes successfully, sometimes not. But I play a lot of really volatile and dangerous characters, and it has been a life's process of trying to figure out how to access it, but then also how to put it away again. So, it's the job, and it's unstable. And, my kids laugh as they're getting in the business because, I was 23 and a father, and particularly as my oldest son was going through it and in theater school, they're just really, you're dredging up a whole bunch of stuff. And he's like, how on earth were you raising little kids and doing this? Like, they felt like they were just a mess. Like they were, like they would need to nap for a week after some particularly emotional scene or an emotional class or whatever, where they're playing with the their worst fears or their worst memories or whatever it is. But part of this business is to learn to do it in a healthy way. Is to find that balance, is to keep sane and to keep well enough to keep working and working well.
Yeah, you touched on a few things there that made me think of a TED Talk I saw you in, which is actually one of the first times I've seen you actually on screen. And you talked about method acting, and that was of interest to me. So, oh, okay, Greg's talking about method acting. But correct me if I'm wrong, but you utilize method acting as a way to become a better man. And did that process help you prepare and then also come down from those emotional highs and lows?
Yeah, it did. And it's the thing about it, and again, I'm speaking to an actress, you'll understand, is that I spent my life shaping myself to fit a character created by an author, by a playwright, by a screenwriter. Now, it's always me. It's just different versions of myself. And sometimes there's a great sympathetic relationship between myself and the character where it literally feels like, oh, you're speaking in my voice and the things just mean something to me right away. And then there's sometimes you find yourself lacking for a character, particularly, again, when I was doing Bitten, this pack alpha, he had some leadership qualities and a grounded masculinity that I didn't feel I had. So I started working with a therapist. I started teaching at-risk young men in the inner city of Toronto acting to volunteer and to be a mentor in the community at large. So in that way, I spent my life, molding myself to these characters and all just finding and revealing or developing different parts of myself. And I took a step back going, well, why can't I do the same thing for my life? Decide what I want my life to look like. And then take a step back and go, well, who would be the character that I would need to be to live that life? And then do the actor's work of like writing out all the character qualities, like a breakdown and a backstory for this character, and start to find those pieces of myself that I'd need to draw into play that. And if there were pieces missing, develop those skills, right down to wardrobe, the way you carry yourself physically, movement, voice and speech. And I've taken that idea after the TED Talk, and I've now started doing some corporate work and working on a book which should be ready this spring called The Power of Not Being Yourself, using acting techniques to play every role in your life more successfully. Because we all have this idea of who we are. We're playing a character in life, and that character has been written for us by our life experience, by our parents, our friends, our grandparents, teachers, all of it is created who we think we are. And we're really attached to that, this authentic self. Yes, it is an authentic self, but that's just the version of you that you're most comfortable with. And I kept wondering, well, why Why can I act so differently on a film set, more confident, more daring, more whatever it is, in the service of an author's vision? Because I would give myself permission to behave that way. So I work through a series of techniques to help you define areas of your life, roles that you play in your life that you'd like to play better. And then I help you create a version of yourself to play those roles more successfully. A lot of time working with salespeople, with corporations, and they'll have these are the requirements of the job. You need to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 qualities that make the ideal salesperson, and maybe they have 3, but there's two of those pieces that are difficult for them. Maybe they're not as confident as like to be, maybe not as aggressive, maybe not as much follow through. Well, okay, great. So let's create a character, a version of you that's going to do those things, and you do it as a sense of play, and you rehearse behavior, and when you're doing it, you give yourself permission. I'm just playing a character today. I'm just being Bob, the super aggressive salesperson, or Bob who never misses a call, or Bob who can shake a hand firmly or whatever, and you play this character, and you create wardrobe for that character, and you keep it separate from your real life version. And I find that people are having some great strides. Or the other way, you might have a person who's incredibly successful in business, ruthless, shark. Their marriage is a disaster. They have no relationship with their kids because they approach everything the way they approach business. So I help them find what's the softer, gentler version of themselves. Do emotional prep, listen to music that will put them in the right state when they're coming home, get out of that suit and into a cardigan and cords. I mean, really over the top central casting stuff, and play the role. Imagine just for an hour, you're going to play the Mr. Dress Up version of yourself. And because it's not you, give yourself permission to just act that way for a little while. Just act that way. And the more you act that way and associate it with a wardrobe, a quality of voice, a way you're moving, now when you put that wardrobe on, your body's going to remember how it wants to act. You've created that character and you've absorbed that character in yourself, and now you have access to it. So it's, these are the 2 passions of my life right now, or 3. Acting is still acting, and until I die is the thing I love most. But I'm really enjoying the coaching and teaching, and I'm really enjoying taking the skills I've learned as an actor and helping people apply it through private coaching, life coaching for their life, professionally. And all sort of the Venn diagram with acting in the center is making my days full.
What a wonderful way to inspire others. And think about legacy. You're not just inspiring actors, you're inspiring salespeople, marketing people, corporations, people who are number crunchers, whatever, to just be better versions of themselves.
It's been really rewarding, and I love people. I love to interact with them. So yeah, I feel very fortunate that this next chapter where I don't have kids at home, that my days are filled with driving them around and the excitement and bustle of being a parent as well as being an actor. So now I'm finding that this mentoring, coaching, teaching version of myself is getting more opportunity to grow, and it's something that I'm really enjoying.
Yeah. So on the note of growth, you've actually done an interesting project where you got to play the father. You did some motion capture work. Was that enjoyable? Would you do it again?
Well, I mean, yes, I would do it again. And I was so lucky. I was so fortunate that the people I worked with at Ubisoft, the creative director of the game at the time was a guy named Dan Hay, and the lead writer was Drew Holmes. And they had been looking for the father for years, apparently. And I got a call from my agents right before Christmas, however many years ago that was. And they said, would you be interested in auditioning for a video game? And I said, no, of course not. I'm film, TV, no. Had no idea what video games had become. Had no idea. I was still, I'm old enough that I was remembering Atari and Activision and Tecmo Bowl on the, So they said, well, would you read some material? So they sent me this monologue that was pretty much as written became in the game, about being young and we're pregnant, and I don't know what to do, and I don't think I'm worthy. I'm just this nobody from nowhere, and then my wife dies, and it was this really fraught writing. And I went in, and the director David, not David Hackle, his name's driving me. awesome video game director. And then David something is driving me crazy. Anyways, he was there. I put down one take, and then I left. And they're like, wait. And I was gone. And then I got a call after Christmas that the creative director, Dan, wanted to meet with me. We did I went to the studio in Toronto. We went on a little Zoom thing. They wanted to see a little bit more of the preaching, less intimate stuff. Did that. They flew me out to Montreal, and they had this world that they had created. And they were writing it as we went along. And they were so wonderful because, when you're doing a video game, they've got a camera on your face, and you're dotted everywhere, and they're mapping everything that happens. And then you're wearing sort of like a wetsuit, for lack of a better word, with dots all over you, and you're in a huge vom. It's a big open space, like working in a big theater. And so you're kind of like doing a play, but also the camera's right in your face for a close-up. So that was interesting. But for some of the very intimate moments, they knew as an actor that I didn't like all that space. I don't like all that space. I like maybe the animal in me wants to be in my cave. So they would build like a little room, 3-sided room for some of the intimate monologues and the eulogies and those things. And I would be playing opposite another person, and they would be the player or the other character. So they created this real like filmic intimacy for me. So the experience, the writing was great. The character was thrilling. The game ended up being the biggest selling game that Ubisoft's ever had. Then they brought me back for a couple more, another game for the New Dawn, and then for the downloadable content for Far Cry 6. And then I did a movie with them a little for Amazon. So it was incredible. But again, they made the work intimate, which is the way I like to work. And the writing was so good. So if you gave me that situation again, I'd love to do it. I think the future of that medium is incredible. That's so interactive, the storytelling, but the narrative work is just brilliant.
All right. Before I bring this to a close and ask you what's on tap for 2024, I have to ask you about your wife, because 3 children who are actors, you're an actor, lots of emotion running around that house. How amazing is she? How amazing is she?
She's incredible. And she is, she's had a number of shows on HGTV, which was never part of her plan. It just like that fell into her lap, and she's built a design business, but she is the calmest, most grounded and centered person that I've ever met. And she is surrounded by the emotional chaos of the work. And I'm, can be volatile. The kids are volatile, work, particularly for self-taping, working. I mean, it's big energy happening. She has been patient through the ups and downs of this life, and has been an incredible mom to the kids, has been so stable as a partner. She must like the excitement a little bit. But yeah, she's just, I think you need that. I think you need in life. I feel very blessed. And I know that relationships can work between actors. I totally get it. And many happy marriages have been that way. But I feel blessed that there was always a home to come home to, that I would be off shooting somewhere, and then I'd come and Danielle would be here and the kids would be here, and I'd go right back to my life. Like they would drag me back into, not drag me back, but they'd give me an opportunity to come back to life. And I feel blessed for that. And they also give me such a rich emotional life to draw from in my work, because I care about them so much. And I feel very blessed that I've had a life as well as a life in this business. So.
Okay. All right. So what's on tap for Greg Bryk in 2024? Is there a chance any of your projects will become part of the Montreal International Film Festival?
Well, maybe it is possible. The next thing that people can see me in, I did a little guest star for Law and Order, which will be airing in a few weeks from now. The commercials are out and stuff. And that was a blast. I really, Kathleen Monroe and Aidan Young's from Rectify, and Kathleen's from a lot of things. I worked primarily with them, and they were great. It was a fun character. The creative team, the Cameron sisters are great. Holly Dale was the director who I had worked with on Mary Kills People. I loved her. And then I shot a couple of movies at the end of last year, one a comedy, which I don't get to do a lot of, which was a blast, though, called Race Walkers, which is being edited and has done some test screenings and scoring very high. It's a comedy about race walking. and I play an ex-champion, double medalist, and my son is the golden boy of the sport. And I'm like the biggest fish in the smallest pond. I mean, goldfish bowl small. And my nephew, who is not a race walker, finds this washed up ex-athlete who just happens to have the perfect stride, and it's sort of a competition between us, and it's lovely. And Robbie Amell and Italia, his wife, are in it. Kevin and Phil were the writers and directors, and they're amazing. Jeff Chan of Code 8 is the producer. Jess Seguero, who's on Frasier, is in it. It's a great cast, a lot of fun. So that might do the festival. And I did a movie called Gin and the Wild Dog, which is sort of a, shoot 'em up action thriller, psychological thriller that was also a lot of fun. Shockingly played a bad guy in that as well. And, those could be on. And I shot a movie a couple of years ago that's also looking to do festivals this year it was called Desire of the Prey. I'm not sure that was the working title. I'm not sure what it is now, but I was at Montreal with the Fight Machine and a long time ago with a movie called Neil, where I played myself and a clone of myself. And I love Montreal. I love the festival. Great festival, great town, great movies. So it's always a pleasure to be there.